All right, everyone. And so then moving forward, after these couple hundred years of the Heian Age where everything is peaceful, Japan is united, it's like you take this beautiful Japanese vase and just smash it on the ground. And that's what happens in what becomes the feudal era of Japan. Now, what happens, these Heian Age rulers, they're going to lose control to what was called individual lords. And these lords were called daimyos. And you see on this picture here, it talks about daimyos. Daimyo is they are these wealthy landowners, and it goes to a feudal system. Now, for those of you that don't know what a feudal system is, think about the knights in shining armor in Europe. And what would happen would be a deal would be made essentially. So you'd have a daimyo, this wealthy landowner, and he would need people to fight on his behalf. And so a trade would be made. He would go to a warrior known as a samurai and say, if you pledge to fight for me on my behalf, then I will in turn provide you with a place to live and food to eat. And so it was essentially a trade type system. This is called feudalism. And that's a real basic way of explaining that. And what happens, this breaks out all across Japan. And we end up with this feudal system where it is these individual lords known as daimyos that end up fighting with each other and competing. And they rely heavily on their warrior class called samurais. Now, I'm sure you've heard of samurais before. They were the warriors that would protect their lord's estate, their daimyo's estate, and they fought for their lords. They would give their lives for their lord. A true samurai would openly give their life for their lord when they commit to them. And we're going to talk more about that tomorrow. But the samurai warrior class, it becomes their own social class. And I have to emphasize that this period, these few hundred years, it is a bloody, bloody period of Japanese history. It is a bloody time. This is when we're talking about fields of samurai charging at each other, swords blazing in the air, with the flags of their lord's estate on their backs, willing to die for their daimyo, for their lords. And it was a very bloody time. It was a time of backstabbing, treachery. It was all about which individual warlord could gain the most power. And you look at this map and you can see how Japan is just fractured into dozens of these smaller daimyos. And each one of these is competing to become the greatest warlord or daimyo. And so if you look ahead, this is kind of how the hierarchy looks. We have at the top, there is the traditional emperor. He was at the top of the society, but he had very little real power, kind of like the king or queen of England, more of a figurehead. The one thing he did have that was of real power is appointing the shogun. The shogun is what the ultimate goal is to be if you're one of these warlords. It's to become the actual, true, strongest leader of Japan. This is the shogun is the most powerful daimyo. The other daimyos are also up there. They're the wealthy landowners that I talked about previously. And then the next level down, you have the samurai. These are Japanese warrior classes, highly respected in Japan. Below that, you have the largest class, and that's the peasants and the artisans. These are the ones that are out working the fields and making goods. Now, you may think to yourself, well, wait, down here at the bottom, we have the merchants. That's a little bit unusual if you think of like ancient Greece and Romans. Well, the Japanese believed in actually producing goods, and they realized that these peasants and artisans, they're making things for society. Merchants are just buying and selling. They're not. So they were seen a little bit lower. So here we have an actual true photograph of a real samurai. Samurai weren't abolished until late into the 1800s. And so photography was around. This is a real photograph of a samurai. It would have had a mix of leather and chainmail with their samurai sword, the katana. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. So, just to recap, we have the years of feudal Japan. This is when the Heian Age rulers lose control. They rely on these samurais that pledge themselves to fight and die for their lord's estate, become their own social class. It's a time of war, of bloodshed, of backstabbing. And of course, we have the shogun. This is the emperor's chief general of the clan with the most power. That's the goal, to become the shogun.